Hi, everybody. This is Carrie Mahoney again from the ARC of Massachusetts. I want to welcome all of you to today's webinar with Lisa Drennan, who is formed a company called Merge, and it's about diverse abilities inclusion consulting. So we're very excited to have you, Lisa. Today's we're going to be talking about inclusion within community recreation programs. So how do you build a team culture with program providers that will result in successful participation for our family members? So before we get started, I just wanted to, run through a couple of different things around the webinar. We have muted everybody upon entry, and the reason why we do that is because we record these sessions and then we upload them onto our YouTube channel. So if in case somebody couldn't come today, they can still access the session. So that is to make a good sound quality. We do mute everybody upon entry. We ask that you chat in your questions. Probably we will save them till the end because, Lisa could be discussing something on slide 3. So just you can ask your question to everybody or me. I'm Carrie Mahoney from the ARC of Massachusetts, and I'm your moderator for today. If you're having any issues at all with technology, actually the best thing to do is to log off and log back on. So everybody, if you could, I want to make sure that the audio is working for everyone. So can everybody chat into me? Just say,
good morning.
Hi.
Or good afternoon. Hi.
I can hear you. Good. Okay. Kathy. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So it seems like that's working fine. I did have a couple of polls. Now, I have never done a poll before, so this is this is a new thing we're doing. So I'm going to launch our poll. It's basically 3 questions, and it's all about getting to know you. So let's see how this goes. So we have our first question up there. Does your loved one participate in a segregated or inclusive recreation program? And you just check off one of the boxes. Okay, great. Looks like people are using that. Awesome. I got a couple of chat questions. I need a neither box. Okay, sorry, Tricia, I don't have a neither box, but that would be something that we can definitely look into next time. I appreciate your feedback. Okay. So 17% of you said that your kids are in segregated programs, with an additional 17% said inclusive programs, and then 67% said you use both. So thank you for that question. Now we want to, share results. So I apologize for walking. I've never done this before. So the other questions I had, but I don't know why they're not showing, is how old are your loved ones? So if you could chat in those answers to me, that would be great. And then also, are you a parent? Are you a professional? Or are you both? Okay. Just wait a minute. So it looks like we have lots of transition age people. So, I'm looking at 17-year-olds, 21-year-olds, and 23-year-old, and a 20-year-old. So it looks like it's that 18 to 24-year-old group. And we have many parents, we have many professionals, and we have both. So anyways, and we do have a someone who is a 35-year-old. Okay, and then, oh, she's 12 years old, seventh grader, and I'm a grandparent, but an involved caregiver. Okay, so thank you for sharing all that information. So at this point, I'm going to have Lisa take it away and, with her presentation, and I'll be advancing the slides for her. So just tell me next, Lisa, and I'll flip to the next slide. I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit more.
Very good. Thanks, Carrie, so much. And I'm so happy to be here to share this webinar with you. So let's slide right into the next slide. And I'll work on introducing myself. But just to give you an idea about what we're going to be doing this afternoon, we'll have a little bit of welcome and introduction. I'll introduce myself to you. What is inclusion? Bridging the gap, a little conversation on what we're here to do, and then get into the meat of our webinar, Top 10 Strategies for Community Inclusion. I'm going to review the 4 different models of inclusion, and then we'll wrap up with a little discussion on the benefits of community inclusion. So we can just go right to the next slide. And I want to share a little bit with you about my background and my history and what brings me here today. And I believe that what shaped the mission and the values of the work that I do today. So if we start, if we'll click through, Carrie, I started out as a direct support professionals working at New England Village, and that's in Pembroke, Mass. It's a residential community for adults with developmental disabilities. And I started there when I was 17, worked my way up, and my next role was more focused on the recreation and of providing supports for adults with intellectual developmental disabilities. I went on to build and oversee the Solar Wellness Center, which was there part of the campus at New England Village. All that experience in helping to teach these individuals how to participate in recreation and enrichment activities like swimming, aquatics, and music and art. It really fell nicely into my next role, which was approximately 6-7 years ago. I became the association director of the South Shore YMCA. So that was just a nice transition. So I went from working with people who supported these individuals to participate in wellness and enrichment opportunities to now working with the general community, a Zumba instructor, a swim instructor, someone who worked at a camp or in sports or whatnot that maybe didn't have any experience working with this population. And that was my role, was to increase, give them the tools and knowledge and increase their awareness in giving them the tools to work with persons in inclusive models. So through my work, to be the founder of my company, Merge Diverse Abilities Inclusion Consulting. So I primarily work with recreation, sport, camp, any organization that's out there for the general community, and I teach them how to be more inclusive of persons with diverse abilities. And I use the term diverse abilities because to me that means all the different ways in which a person might interact with the world, experience the world around them, learn, and receive sensory input around them. So that could be physical, developmental, intellectual, social, emotional learning, encompasses all those ways, ability levels a person might have. So we can get right into the meat of this. I want to share with you my 6 inclusion principles and why I'm sharing this. This is what I work to teach the community organizations out there like YMCAs or Boys and Girls Clubs, town recreation programs, libraries. Okay, so these are the principles that I teach them, and I think it's important for you to understand that as we move into now your role in supporting your family member or loved one. Okay, so what I teach is organizational commitment, and this means that everybody in the organization should have a commitment to inclusion, from your CEO down to, the people who have boots on the ground, your counselors, your instructors, so on and so forth. They all have a responsibility toward inclusion, and that we practice inclusion for everybody, all your members of your organization. Next is meaningful participation, and what I mean here is that Inclusion isn't just physical proximity or, you know, an organization and saying, oh, we have a program for that population over here. That's okay, but that's not inclusion. Inclusion is that we're working towards having every individual member have meaningful participation in what they're doing, so that everybody has something of value to contribute. We meet people where they're at, and I teach that we make accommodations and modifications where necessary, and that success is individualized, okay? And that we really try to look at the person as an individual. What do we need to do to help them to be successful at the program they're participating in? All right, next is working towards full inclusion. We're going to get into this. Authentic inclusion model. Okay, and then
hey, Lisa, excuse me, this is Carrie. We lost your voice for a while, so I don't know if there was a phone glitch or whatever, but you're okay now.
Okay, all right, I apologize for that. Hopefully not too much. We're going to go on to the fifth one. Let's get to success. And this is more an attitudinal approach that I like to explain to the programs I'm working with, that we should be always focused on, instead of saying, oh, that can't work or that won't work, having the philosophy of how can we make this work? Okay, and then finally, very simply, everyone has a right to belong, to be welcomed, engaged, and supported. All right, Carrie, we can move on to the next slide. Wonderful. So this wraps up, and my message to the programs that I work with: inclusion is about intentionally planning for the success of all. It's not just a program or a staff member or an event that you run. It's everything that you do every day that helps for everybody to be successful. So let's get into this now. We can move on to the next slide. All right, fantastic. All right, I'm going to share with you top 10 tips or best practices. And again, this is what I've learned along the way. I think I have a very unique and blessed background, that having worked with this population for many, many, many years, and understanding kind of our side, you know, of all the struggles, that how difficult it might be to have our family members, or the persons we support, access the community. Then going to the why and my role there, I was really able to kind of see the other side and, you know, understand what are some of the barriers, and what's important is the relationship between our family members, community members, and the recreation programs that are being offered. Okay, so I pulled out of this the top tips that I want to share with you from my lens. What I'm seeing from both sides might be helpful for you in supporting your person to access recreation community programs. All right, so we can just jump right into these, and I'll read them off as we go along. And then you can, very good, we can go to the next slide. Let's see. Involve the individual you support. Okay. Engage a person-centered planning focus, which we should all be familiar with, ensuring their voice is heard. But one thing I'd like to share with you here is, this is a quote from Beth Mount, and she's a disability advocate working to build stronger communities. And this quote, I think, really kind of nails this. They, or their dreams, drive this process. And as we go through this process, we want to have all of those involved with the focus person, or the person you support, to see the total person, recognize his or her desires and interests, and discover completely new ways of thinking about the future of the person. So I just really love that quote, and I wanted to share that with you because I think it kind of embraces everything that this best practice is about. All right, help them to identify their purpose, their gifts, what they like, or what they can share. All right, and then finally, let's think outside the box. There are many ways to experience recreation in the community, and you know, something I want to share. We'll get into specifics later, but just for an example, say you know your family member wanted to join a running club, and that may not seem like right away is the, you know, how we're going to do it. It could seem like a little bit of a leap there, but perhaps you start by volunteering at the club's charity 5K event or something of that nature. So we need to think outside the box when we're looking for opportunities and getting folks involved in their community and recreation. Okay, let's get to the next slide. and identifying the interest, the type and location of program. So start with exploring the interest with the person you support, and again, let's think outside the box. And let's really think outside the box. Whitewater rafting could be an interest. Explore how that could happen. Salsa dancing, book clubs, a trip to a casino, boxing class. And then, of course, the standard where most people look would be the YMCA or town recreation program as well. But really, let's think of outside that box. And the key is if there's a program or offering out there for the general population, it should be considered for all. And we're going to work together to ensure that it is. Okay, the next bullet is think about, I'm sorry, you can go back. I jumped there. Think about physical accessibility and universal access. So just something to be mindful of, especially if it's the first time going to this location. Before signing up, make sure to check out the facility properly, where the offering would be, and any considerations that your family member might have. Locker rooms, terrain, how are directions given, is the noise level, if that's a concern, is there a better time to participate if it's too crowded, just to, take in consideration whatever needs that your family has, and make sure that the site is accommodating for that. And the third bullet, what type of program structure would work best for this person or this activity? We're going to go into more depth in this after we go over the 10 best practices, but to find what works best for your family member, keep in mind this can change from topic to topic. So, for instance, Sally may be able to participate in drama class in a fully inclusive opportunity or setting, but in one-to-one may need a more specialized swim instruction. So we just want to keep that in mind as well. Okay, we can go on to the next the next slide is you're finding your staff contact, okay? You want to really get to know who is the person I should be working with to help make this to be successful. So call ahead of time, ask if there's an inclusion staff. They may call it adaptive programs, or there could be integrated programs. There could be a variety of different titles to that, but I would suggest calling the organization ahead of time and making that connection. If no identified staff, seek out a management or higher position, okay? And in some cases, so at a Y, it could be your branch exec. If it were like a camp, it would be the camp director, just for an example. In some places, they may have an instructor that comes in just to provide this opportunity. So they may not be a staff there, but they're pulled in as, say, like a consulting instructor. So keep that in mind as well. You'll want to know that a little bit up front when all possible. So once engaged, I always say, look for the leaders, who's really digging into this full inclusion at the program that you're working at, whether it be a Y or recreation program, and build. Okay, next slide. Learn about their supports and experience, okay? And this kind of goes hand in hand on how do we get to yes philosophy. So it's going to be a little bit of teamwork here. Inquire about the program's design and ratio. So you want to know what that is up front. The suggestion to learn more about their strengths and what you're working with, and how do we build from there. So just as we want people to focus on the strengths of your family member, right? We want to look at the strengths of the program, because not all programs are going to be perfect in this area, but we're all working together to help them to get to yes or get to success. All right. And if, be careful not to critique what they don't have or do have, and think about helping to make the programs more accessible and improved. So just having that let's get to success attitude, just as I teach the Ys and recreation programs. And something of note, there is a difference between if you're, finding out who is teaching or instructing. There is a difference between someone who maybe has had experience working in special education versus inclusion experience. Because often or sometimes someone with a special education background, they may be more used to kind of the specialized instruction outside of, say, the classroom or whatnot, and not so much as familiar with inclusive models. So we just want to keep that in mind if full inclusion is what you're looking for, okay? The next bullet is understand the bullet. I keep saying bullet. If we can go back one more. Okay, understand the background experience of the inclusion staff, the instructors, coaches, counselors, whoever it may be. And then learn what inclusion practices are already in place, okay? What we want to do is perhaps ask to observe a program ahead of time, and then pay attention to the strengths, but also look at how is staff speaking to participants? Is it age appropriate? Is it respectful? Are staff fostering independence in a positive way? Or perhaps they may be hindering independence, like they're serving them food rather than having them do it themselves, something like that. Now, these are areas that can easily be corrected, but you might want to be aware of where the staff are at, because they need to learn some of these strategies too. Again, they may not have the background or experience, so to be as aware as possible on where they're at once you start, and then we can help correct it as you get going. All right, now we can move to the next slide, the intake process. So be an active part of the intake process and beyond. And this is in the next 3 best practices are all about building a collaborative team. So they're kind of nestled together, but let's start with this one. Disclosure is generally best and on a need to know basis too. So I can't stress this enough, disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. In most cases, it's best to be upfront when sharing about your family member. Think about the information that is important for those supporting them to know, okay? So if you're looking at a fully inclusive program, to hold back information and thinking that, okay, well, we'll just give this a try, like say, for example, at a camp. Often that could be not successful because the staff on the other side don't know enough about them to help them to be successful. So it's best if they're, an inclusive program that wants to make this work, I say fully disclose what might be helpful for them to know. For example, in a camp setting, and I know there's a lot of transition aides or older adults here, but just for an example, you'd want to let them know if they have a one-to-one in school, and try, and if the ratio there is 1 to 10, we want to be upfront about that so you can start problem solving before they start camp, for example, okay? Be upfront about any toileting issues, especially with aquatics options, because there are, solutions or that we can help to make sure that there aren't accidents in the pool. So those types of things can be best addressed upfront, better to disclose. However, on a need-to-know basis only. For example, if there were a 1-hour art class, you wouldn't have to share full details about everything about your family member's background, but focus on the task on hand. For example, in-depth medical history may not be relevant, but that they do have issues with fine motor could be more of an appropriate thing to share. Okay, so I want to focus, when you are sharing, focus on their strengths, go ahead and brag. I think it's a really good opportunity for you to let the staff know, here's something about my son or daughter that, he or she really enjoys or does really well. Those are just as important as the areas that they may need additional support or struggle in. So let's keep that in mind as well, all right, to share their passions, their interests, and be sure to, be proud about that and let them know, because that could be possible help with social interactions with them, particularly with other peers moving forward. And then good communication practice is the third bullet here. So know who your person is that you can check in and out with before or after a class. So, and this could be the instructor, or perhaps there's an assistant, or there's someone else that this could be shared with. So if for example, and I know I'm going to give a camp example again, but just for the sake of sharing, share info if they have a certain accomplishment or, perhaps a bad day, make sure you're sharing that with the staff. Oh, this happened this morning before they start an all-day program, just so that they're aware of that. It could be good, or it could be something great or an accomplishment, or it could be something that could cause them to have struggles throughout the day. So know who that person is. But do keep those check-ins relatively brief. Okay, here's the information you need to know, because what we want to be aware of, and swim instruction is a good example of this, often the instructors have like less than 5 minutes between classes to get to the next class. So we want to, have a quick check-in and then a quick check-out at the before and after class, okay? That would be helpful. If you need to have a longer conversation, I would suggest speaking to the supervisor ahead of time. So making sure that the information is, relayed properly, and then the supervisor would help to ensure that all solutions are explored. Okay, so we can go on to the next one here. The next slide is all players on the team are valuable. And this again is part of the building a collaborative team section. So start the relationship valuing their input. Whether you engage with an organization, or when you engage with an organization, consider it a team where all players are working together, and we start our relationship in that area. And just to keep in mind, and I just want to make a point here that often these programs, you got to keep in mind that their staff could be 17-year-old camp counselor, okay? It could be a 16-year-old swim instructor, or someone who is a fitness instructor who has no experience working with this population in the past. So we want to keep that in mind, that these are not specialists that necessarily that you maybe have been used to if your son or daughter, was in school or a day program or other types of day habilitation program, or so on and so forth. Okay, so we just want to keep that in mind. And then identify who else would be on that team. So the team is the individual seeking recreation, your family member, or the person you're supporting. Make sure we're getting their feedback. Program staff, so that could be inclusion staff if they do have inclusion staff, whoever the hands-on staff is. The team could be your family member's school or counselor or previous instructors. We want to gain as much feedback to help for this relationship to be successful. What worked, what didn't work. So sometimes, for example, if someone is new to, let's say, an art class, and there's a certain area they're struggling on, but they took an art class back in a different location, before you moved to Massachusetts, let's say, what was successful in their last art class that helped them, for example. Okay, so you want to really be thinking about how do we pull all members of the team together. I often tell staff that I'm working with when I'm doing trainings, your first person of contact when you're having a difficult situation with a kiddo or teen or adult would be to, inquire with the family. What do they do that helps in this situation? Or could they ask the school? Are they experience this type of behavior at school? And if so, what do they do? So you see how we all want to be working as a team together. And then the final bullet here, be available and responsive. And with this, what I mean here, or have a contact that is available and responsive if you're not the one dropping off or being there. In the first classes, allow for that independence, but be nearby. And then eventually, we want to we'll talk about this Aide Fade, and then back off so that they're participating as fully as possible independently. So in a day camp, make sure to be able to be reached easily, or if it's a day program, a whole long day program, that you can be available to help resolve issues, give your input over the phone. That might be able to solve a problem right away. And again, being available means if a request is made, maybe bring in their favorite sensory toy, or review an expectation list at home. Just be sure to be responsive to that. And all right, great. So one more thing I want to say here. Remember that the rules of the program or the organization should should apply to all. However, we want to be flexible and provide reasonable accommodation. So what I always tell staff that I'm working with or training is that if there's, you know, something that if an individual, a camper, a participant, or a student is struggling and breaking some of the rules of the program, we want to be more proactive in helping for that not to occur, of course, but we also, and make reasonable accommodations. But if it's this issue, then to respond to the safety of all. And, you know, the focus should be moving forward. If it's a major issue, perhaps they have to be dismissed or to, you know, take the afternoon off or whatnot, but have the focus be on improving the situation for the next day or moving forward, and focus on a reentry plan so that they can be successful when they return. Okay, and just if your family member has a one-to-one or an aide or somebody that's assisting them, the same expectations that they have of their staff should apply to the aide or the para or assistant or whoever's there with them, if that is the case. All right, so I want to go to the next slide. We're on number 7, strengthening their team. And this is about, building a collaborative team. So the key to success is making sure you understand what their expectations are, and then be very clear on your expectations as well. And that's okay, and that's actually going to help to make a healthier starting relationship. So if there are expectations you have, be sure that you're communicating that to the right people there, whoever your staff contact is, but then also understand what their expectations are, so you're all on the same page. And next one is, if you like what you see, share it. Okay, so offer to share a story or a testimonial. If it's working really well, you know, make a post on social media that this program is, what is happening, how it's helped to improve your son or daughter's or family members' participation, and so on and so forth. And other ways that we can help strengthen their program is to understand what their mission is and maybe get involved or volunteer as a family, participate outside of the activities that you're doing at that organization, participate in something as a family, become part of the community. I think is a really helpful way to just strengthen the relationship. Okay, I would also suggest, if there's something that you do not see, a class that you'd like, I bring it up. That when I was at the South Shore Y, often many of the programs that we started were because of a result of a family member or a group of, you know, a couple family members coming up to me and say, we would really like this particular type of class. What could we do? We don't see anything in your existing schedule. And then we spent some time creating that curriculum and made that class happen because there was a need. So don't be afraid to speak up to help them to offer more. If another suggestion that you could do is write a complimentary note to the CEO or executive director if a particular staff's doing something really well, or, you know, is engaging in a very positive way, or has helped, gone above and beyond. Make sure we write a little note to say, you know, to recognize that, and I think that would go a very long way. And then as far as dealing with challenges, when challenges arise, we want to use that same kind of business world professional strategies by, you know, starting at the level where the conflict might be. Perhaps it's with an instructor, and offer guidance and not criticism, to help to give guidance that'll help them to correct or help your family member to be successful. If it's not resolved, then move up the chain. And here's some, you know, suggestions that may or may not fit or be appropriate, but take them if you'd like. You could offer to do a training or lead a discussion. That could be a helpful piece of helping the organization to learn and increase their toolkit, so to speak. I know of some Ys where they had a parent come in, there was a fear of their family member had type 1 diabetes, and there was hesitancy in having them be part of the program, but the family member went in and did a little training for them just so that they could understand. And then that just alleviated a roadblock that they would have otherwise had, and it moved forward in a much positive way. And just wrapping up on this slide, don't trash on social media. So if there is a conflict, go right to the administration, make them aware of the issue that may have come up. In most cases, they want to work with families to make this better. And I just say, let's just be patient, and we're all in this together, helping to make a change of our culture. So if we really do think of it in that way, this is a huge change. And this is something that, I think about almost every day, is that I feel like I'm trying to change cultures. And it's going to take a while, and it's going to take our patience and working together with them to bring them up to par so that they have the skills to, help your family member to be successful. Okay, so now we can move on to the next slide. Provide effective support. All right, and then we might start with help prepare the person you support, ask for the class expectations or schedule ahead of time. That could be very helpful if they have it. Ask for a photocopy so that you can review it with your family member ahead of time if that's helpful for them. You may want to take photographs, maybe create your own social story, or ask if they already have a social story. Sometimes that, some of those strategies are in place at certain programs, depends on where they're at. I suggest observe a class or take a tour ahead of time. That might help you and or your family member to be more comfortable before you start, okay? If asked to review something between visits, just be sure to follow up with that, okay? So our next bullet is take a least restrictive, most independent approach. And I want to talk a little bit about Aide Fade as well. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, it says that children who receive special education should learn in the least restrictive environments. This means they should spend as much time as possible with peers who do not receive special education. Your child should be with kids in general education to the maximum extent that is appropriate. I feel like this is the same for recreation, and that we always want to be moving towards full inclusion. So I echo these sentiments for recreation. I want to talk a little bit about Aide Fade as well, in terms of, say, direct support staff that might be going, or an aide, or if you're assisting or whomever, making sure that we're giving just enough support and then backing off and helping them to be part of the group or part of the culture or part of the community or the class, whatever they're involved in. Just for those of you who may be direct support staff, I want to speak a little bit to you on your role in supporting folks. So whether they're in a school program, a transition program, perhaps employment supports but partial day program or day habilitation program, whatever the case may be, or residentially. If you're supporting an individual, your role is to support and enrich and engage, and it doesn't end when you walk in the door, okay? So you want to be, as a direct support staff, following all the expectations of any other member or participant or student in the class or whatever the case may be. So for instance, signing in, and this is something I would always try to teach, whether with the group homes or membership staff at the Y, that as members we sign in and we check in, we want to teach that to the individuals we're supporting as well. Don't do it for them, but teach them. All right, and be a role model for other program staff at the facility on appropriate interactions, and be engaged and available, okay? Finally, facilitate social interactions, and this is allowing the before and after class time. You want to make sure that you're there even 10 minutes before and stay a few minutes after. This is where social interactions and real community building or relationship building happens, is before and after a class, so keep that in mind as well. And then number 9, let's look at roadblocks, and we can move on to the next slide. Dealing with roadblocks. So if you hear from a program, What do you do if they say we're not an inclusive program? So someplace we may start is inquire to what are their roadblocks, offer to help rather than, kind of blame or, threaten that we're going to get a lawyer because they have the right to be here. If you need to do that, that could be the step, but let's start with trying to help and see if we can help them break down some of their roadblocks or barriers, okay? What are their concerns? Perhaps we can help connect them with the local ARC or agencies for guidance, point them towards a similar program that is successful. So let's think about that. Then when expectations don't allow, how can we work together to reach our goals? Again, helping to be part of the solution. Could you offer to or suggest to lead a discussion or a training like we mentioned before? Don't give up on the whole association if just one class you're struggling with. Just maybe we'll try something else and then go back, but then again, work with your team there. Go back to that team and see if you can help work that out. All right. And then finally, what to do if you can't find any suitable programs. And then that's where I'm going to suggest you ask your local providers, your CPACs, ARCs, where are they hearing that other families are having success? If it's a Y or YMCA, ask if they are, it's called the DIG-Y, and that's Diversity Inclusion Global, and that they would be more advanced in this initiative, so that could be somewhere to look. Or they could reach out to the YUSA for resources and trainings. Recreation programs have access to, it's called Mass Rec and Park Association, where trainings could happen as well. And I do trainings in both these areas, so I'm there helping to provide this for the future. Okay, and so that wraps up our 10. We're going to move into our participation models. Oops, wait a minute, I missed one here. Patients working with, okay, I'm sorry. Patients balanced with advocating. So we want to work towards success, creating that let's get to, we want to work towards creating or instilling a let's get to success approach. And something to think about here is to learn more about their strengths and what you have to work with and how do we build from there. Okay, so we want to really be working together with them, that balance between helping to strengthen their programs, but then also advocating for your child, the person you support. If appropriate, it would be beneficial. We discuss recommending an inclusion training, and then count each step in the right direction as a win towards advocating for more inclusive communities, okay? And we talked about this a little bit, that this is still growing. This is somewhat relatively a new area. So every little step is a win, and we're going to continue to help for them to be more successful. All right, so now we can move on to the next slide. And this is simply our participation models. Now that we've gone through those 10 best practices, I want you to understand the different models, because every program, they may call them different things or have a different label for the different models, but you'll want to know what model it is before you enroll your son or daughter and be aware of that. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. We're going to take them one by one. So our first model is, unfortunately, exclusion model. And exclusion occurs when participants are directly or indirectly prevented from or denied access to an activity. And I think we can all agree here that this is a model we do not want to see in any sport or recreation program, although sometimes we recognize that it may occur. So for this model, there, at least in my eyes, there really isn't a benefit to this model. There's only barriers. And I'm going to take you through the examples, benefits, and barriers of each. And for barriers here, why would there be barriers to this model? Well, I think, or why this is occurring, people could be unafraid or uneducated. An organization might have limited resource or expertise. There could be financial concerns. Physical grounds may not be accessible. Things of that nature could be a barrier in this area. So if we move to the next model, and we can see this is a specialized model. And specialized or disability specific is programs that are offered with instruction of participants provided in separate environments designed to respond to a particular or various impairment. Okay, so with specialized examples would be wheelchair sports or an adaptive swim class for autism or a social skills class. The benefits of this model, it allows specialized instruction. Okay, it could be a gateway to full inclusion or authentic inclusion. When offered in a typical space, this model could introduce others to the disability population, which could be a benefit. And a benefit, some families, quite frankly, might prefer this, and they might prefer this at this stage of their family's life. And for the individual, perhaps they like being with their peers, that there's a comfort there. So the barriers in this is that it may require considerable resources or equipment or staffing, one-to-one, specialized coaching or instructor. So just to keep in mind, that could be some barriers to offering this type of model. We go to the next one, and we're into the next slide is an integrative model. And here's a process of placing participants with disabilities in existing activities. A focus is given on the participants' support so they can fit into the existing system. So examples of this could be, for example, I'll take one in school. A special ed class wants to participate in the school dance, so they have an aide or para assist them so that they can be part of the dance and participate with their peers, but with the assistance of the staff. Some camps have this model. In essence, a peer buddy or a unified sport could be categorized under this model. Some benefits are it still allows specialized support. It's another gateway toward full inclusion. And then when offered in a typical space, again, it can introduce others to the disability population. Again, some parents or family members prefer this. And then in this model of benefit, a typical peer can be an example of how to participate. So they're learning social skills, and it's a place to learn about disability etiquette for a typical peer. Barriers are when the aide or para is with them, they still tend to stand out or be different than the rest of the group. So it could decrease the chances for peer interaction. People or attendees may fall back on the staff to solve any issues that are there, kind of having that, well, they have their own staff to take care of that rather than embracing all of the members of the activity. And from the outside looking in, they're different. It's kind of focusing on the differences and not necessarily the similarities or strengths, and in trying to get that more equitable feeling with everybody else. So we're going to move on to the final one, inclusion, and this is what we always want to be more working towards. Inclusion occurs when there is a recognition and respect for differences among all participants while building on the similarities. It is supporting all participants, instructors, staff, counselors in the system as a whole so that the full range of participation needs can be met. So a focus on development of good instructional strategies that will benefit all learners. And attention is given towards overcoming the barriers in a system that prevent it from meeting the range of different levels of abilities. The system changes to meet the needs of all. And full inclusion is an example, a typical camp where all counselors are taught inclusion strategies. It's a sport where coaches utilize inclusion strategies for all. The benefits, the individuals provide opportunity for the individual, it provides opportunity for meaningful participation. Supports are still in place, but behind the scenes. It gains trust and credibility with families. No one is standing out. All benefit. Everybody who's in that program benefits from the inclusive strategies and engages all learning styles. So you're not so focused on a diagnosis or categorizing someone. It's taught in a way that everybody is successful. And more strengths, it focuses more on your strengths and abilities, and that everybody's contributing to the team or the event or the community. And the barriers here that there's need for education and system-wide change. Some individuals may have high support needs and not be able to fit into the existing ratio, so we'll work to solve that. All right, and then finally wrapping this up, in this inclusion model, the next slide shows this is where we are most likely to have inclusion as a pathway to friendships between persons with and without disabilities. And just to share, when parents of children with disabilities were asked in a survey about what they wanted for their children, the most pressing response was for them to have a true friend. All right, and the final slide. And then what are some benefits of having a more inclusive community? And I know we're getting close to the end here, but if we could just take, I don't know, Carrie, if we want to do a chat, or I could share a couple of those benefits out loud with the group.
Sure. I think at this time, how about we open it up to some questions?
Sure. Fantastic.
Yeah, so just chat in your questions to us and we'll read them. You know, you may want to comment on this slide a little bit while we're waiting for some questions to be chatted in.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about, we want to focus on what are the benefits of inclusive communities, because so often the may seem like it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work from everybody's end. But if we can focus on what the benefits are, that can help us in keeping us moving on this work. So some of the things that we want to think about, it meets the needs of our community. So basically, that's what I share to the programs I work. Our citizen or community member satisfaction is improved. Families are able to participate together under one roof, so they can all go to the Y and participate in what they want, for example, as opposed to having to go to specialized instructions outside. It improves the staff skill set, okay? It legally meets the ADA requirements. We're improving community awareness and acceptance, just a few. So how are we doing? Do we have any other questions, or do you want me to continue with a few of the benefits?
Well, no questions so far. Or,
okay,
you know, feel free, anybody, to chat into what you feel the benefits of having a more inclusive community is as well.
Yeah, and I think for a program, we want to think about that and I'll share this with more on the senior executive level, that this is newsworthy, so to speak, or grant-worthy, and that you get a kind of appeal to their business sense that this being inclusive can help us to perhaps get more grants or more funding or donors to help us to grow our programming further. Peer modeling is a wonderful, wonderful benefit to inclusion. And, you know, basically when deciding how they're going to spend their money, people with diverse abilities or persons who support or have a family member with diverse abilities will patronize business or organizations that support inclusion. So again, it's more flipping it to the business side, but that's important to think about. And we're helping to change the culture, and we're breaking down barriers. So in the future, more jobs can be available, right? So recreation can be a way that we can break down some of the barriers, so that as they become young adults, that we have a community that is more accepting in terms of, say, jobs, for example. And that's what I have, unless anyone else has any other areas to share, anything that you think is a benefit that I didn't cover.
Let's see, we do have a question.
Sure.
From Randy.
Okay.
And it says that any suggestions for including an individual who's not particularly engaging or social and needs full support?
Sure. And so I'm wondering, and if Randy's just able to share it, would it be an adult or a child that could help with the answer?
Actually he's a young adult. He's 23 years old.
Okay, so a young adult, so 23-year-old, yeah, so helping that person. That's where I would reach out. So if you were, say, looking at a Y, for instance, that's where reaching out to someone in a, you know, maybe the inclusion staff, or if it is a, you know, management level position there, and sharing that that's one of the goals, that this is a challenge, and what suggestions, which programs or activities would be a good fit to start. Perhaps it's coming and observing something else at the Y, you know, an activity that might be going on, and then gradually moving in towards participating on some level. I would also suggest, often these types of programs often offer opportunities that are there and available for the entire community. So say like a movie night or a, you know, fitness and wellness fair or something of that nature that's open for everybody. It might be a safer place for someone to come and start to be part of the community and start to see familiar faces. Perhaps they come and just observe a swim class if swim is of interest, and then help to make an introduction after the class to the instructor. And perhaps after that, they might end up being, taking that next step to being a participant. Hopefully that was helpful. Happy to answer that offline as well with more detail.
Okay, great. Any other questions from the audience? Or anyone want to share an experience of when maybe inclusion didn't work and how you went about it, or when it went well, and what was the scaffolding you put into place to be able to have it go so well? There's a couple things to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as far as roadblocks, I think, in my experience and, to helping things to go well, the key is staff training. It is just the key. We have to provide the tools and the confidence to the staff who don't necessarily have this background to give them that. And that's why I say we work together. But if an organization is really looking, to take on an inclusion initiative and be better in their inclusive practices, staff training is going to be the key, and sustainability too. Like, how are they going to create strategies that are more inclusive across the organization and not just, well, we have this program for them, but thinking inclusively as to every aspect of their organization.
Okay, great. Okay.
I don't know if there was one more slide. I think just the final slide there.
Okay, all righty. Sounds good.
Yep.
Is that over?
Oh, question and answer, and then there we go. Yeah, so my contact info, if anybody wants to stay in touch, I welcome you to connect with me. Please join my my social media through Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram, and I welcome you to receive my monthly newsletter so that you can learn more about what I'm doing, and if I can help be of assistance in your family's lives by being a resource for any organizations you work with, I would be happy to.
Okay, terrific. So I want to thank Lisa today for this great presentation and just kind of spurring our ideas on how do we make our kids and our loved ones have more inclusive activities in their life, because that just leads to other relationships down the road. So I will be sending everyone this PowerPoint once the webinar is over, and also you're going to be rerouted to a brief survey on how your webinar experience was, and I hope you join us again. So thanks again, Lisa, for a great webinar, and everybody who participated today. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.